and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the University of Washington School of Medicine Ask Admissions Anything session. We appreciate all of you that have registered and are joining us today for this live webinar, and want to thank you for the great questions you submitted when you registered. The entire admissions team is here to answer those questions, as well as any of those that come up during this session as well. And we received so many excellent questions, and we will attempt to get to them all, but just know that we tried to group them together with common themes. So listen for those themes in the questions that we address today to see if you hear yours. If you don't, please feel free to pop it again into the Q&A, and we will attempt to get to all of the questions today. Many of the answers to the questions that were submitted and that you might still be having can also be found on our website or in previously recorded sessions we have on our YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out as well. For those of you who are joining us live today, though, like I said, we will have the opportunity to have you put those questions or any new questions that you have into the Q&A, and we encourage you to do so. So again, welcome. Good morning. I'm Leanna Muskie. I'm Salish and Kootenai from the Flathead Indian Reservation on the northwestern part of Montana. I'm a Montana WWAMI E96, and I'm a family physician. I currently work for the Tribal Health Department here in my community, and I also have the privilege of serving as the Associate Dean for Admissions at the University of Washington School of Medicine. Today, I am joined by all of my colleagues here, and we make up the admissions team for UW School of Medicine. And our purpose to be with you today is to answer your questions. And really, that's just not our purpose today, but we're always available to answer your questions throughout the admissions cycle, throughout your admissions process. This group of folks are really the content experts. They know the process for applying to medical school, in particular our medical school, kind of inside and out, and always willing to tackle any of the questions that you might have now or throw at them throughout the season. So this might also include additional information about the school in general or the WWAMI program in particular, or highlights of those and things that we are proud of. So just keep in mind, today's purpose is really to answer your questions about the process for applying to UW School of Medicine. We try to sprinkle in general good practices and recommendations for applying to medical school in general. And our goal is that you feel better prepared after you attend this session today. We are going to save some of the questions about things like our curriculum or special programs or services that might be available at our school in particular for another day, another session. We just really want you to get the information about the process today. Please also check our social media and YouTube channel for additional information about those kinds of topics, as well as webinars specific to that content. Probably the most important resource for you to check out is our UW School of Medicine website. So please, if you haven't visited there previously, that's always going to be our first response of how to get your questions answered. We recognize that it's very, we'll say, robust in its content, and sometimes it requires a little bit of patience to be able to navigate. But just know that the majority of what we talk about today and really the information that you need to know can be found there. But we also recognize that every individual's path to medicine and journey is unique, and we want to be able to help you navigate through some of those unique situations as they come. So feel free to reach out to us directly through email if you still have questions after this session. We will try to post our information throughout the webinar and again at the conclusion. So with all of that, I think it's time to get started. So we had several folks ask questions about, generally what makes a competitive candidate for our program, for the School of Medicine, for WWAMI. And so I'm going to ask my colleague, Sarah, do you want to get us started with that question?
Sure. A competitive candidate for our program is someone who demonstrates in their application that they are prepared for medical school and for the journey ahead of them. And the way to demonstrate that preparedness is through reflection. So it's not just the number of hours that you put down or the things that you list that you've done. It's how you tell us what you've learned from those experiences, right? So that deep reflection is really going to be helpful, and it's going to help you stand out and be competitive. We have a lot of tips and advice on how to make how to improve your reflection and thereby increase your competitiveness. So I recommend checking out the clinical experiences page on our website, and we also have a video on YouTube on the same topic. So um, um, it's not always a natural thing to do. It takes some practice. So I recommend getting some practice in to practice that reflection so you can demonstrate it on your application. We also got several questions on this topic, so I'm going to ask Alexander, how are alumni from UW, but not WWAMI, considered in admissions?
Thanks, Sarah. That's a great question. First of all, we do consider applicants from every institution on an equal footing. There's no preference one way or the other for any particular school, including the University of Washington. So in terms of that, it doesn't make a difference as to whether you went to the UW or somewhere else. If you're not from WWAMI, so not one of our in-region states, but you went to the University of Washington or any other school within that region, you have Idaho, Montana State, etc., that will count as a tie to the region, which is one of the things we look for out-of-region applicants. For more information on that topic, please see our E26 Essentials video and our state eligibility page, and that can give you more information in depth about how out-of-region applicants are considered. And we've got links to that in the chat if you want to take a look there. Right, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Alex. I'm going to ask, are projected hours taken into account? For example, if you have a certain number of clinical hours or other experience hours finished, but then you have additional hours projected for the future, how does the admissions team consider that?
Yep, and that's a great question. We tend to get this a lot in some variety that can often also be rephrased as I'm planning to do this big thing after I submit my application. Should I mention that on the application? Will that be taken into account on my application and so on? And the long and short of that is basically that if you think you are going to be doing something major after you apply, um, even if it is projected and like you say that you're going to do it on your application, we will definitely consider your hours and the stated mention of that big project that you're planning to do after you apply. However, the downside of planning that, before you submit your application is that you won't have the opportunity to talk about it on your application. And if you do have the opportunity to talk about it after you apply, it will likely only be very brief during an interview or some other moment like that. So generally, our advice when you are planning to do a major development in your life or your professionalism after you submit your application is to consider perhaps waiting for another application cycle when you can actually talk about that and include all of that information. Or consider how strong your application already is without mention of this next major thing. And if you would be comfortable with it being a standalone application without the admissions committee hearing or understanding the importance of this next thing that you are going to do. And so the next question that we have, I will pass over back to Leanna. And the question is probably one that everyone's very interested in is we want to know about the impact of federal funding changes. And if you could please speak to that and if there's any anticipated changes to the program.
Yeah, thank you for that, Alex, and for all of you who submitted questions that relate to this topic. I know this is weighing heavy on the minds of many candidates who are thinking about professional school in all of the realms of higher education, but particularly I think what we've heard about a lot in the news is funding for research and particularly science-based curriculum, etc. So I think right now we're still kind of in the unknown, right? So directly impacted our current program, the medical student education program at the University of Washington School of Medicine, within UW, really, we haven't seen any major changes or have been given any directives that anything will change programmatically. We have continued to have the same number of seats in all of our foundation sites across WWAMI. So the number of applicants we will accept in the coming season hasn't been impacted at the time of the recording of this video. So that's where we are today. I think, it's important for candidates to keep keen awareness, to keep your finger sort of on the pulse of what is happening across our country and across, sort of the realm of the academy, of higher education in general. It's very much a valuable space and needs attention and to be protected in the ways that make sense for us to continue to be able to produce physicians to meet our mission, right? To produce folks who are going to be the people who are serving for the many years to come in the capacity of taking care of the needs of our region. So at this point, to, sort of answer the question, I don't really have the answer other than we have not seen any direct funding impacts from in terms of programmatically around the changes and the sort of things that are happening on a national level. All that to say, completely recommend you stay tuned and be aware and, feeling compelled to take action in whatever that might mean for you. So with that, I'm wondering if it's time to go ahead and turn towards some of the questions that have come up in the Q&A. And Sonia, if you wouldn't mind, it looks like we have a question in the chat. And do you want me to read it to you, or would you like to go ahead and read that one for the audience?
I can read it.
Thanks. Go ahead.
All right. So the question that just came in says, I'm a reapplicant and I'm not sure how much of my personal statement I should change. Is it generally okay to just add to my existing personal statement and choose not to alter what I have and choose to not alter what I have as a way to show growth over the past year? Yeah, this is a great question and a really common one from reapplicants, sort of these sorts of themes. We got a similar question for somebody who registered. And I would say it's sort of, every applicant shows growth over over their life, since the past application cycle, over if they've chosen to take some time off in between the one application cycle and the next. Everybody chooses to do that in a different way, but obviously that growth and sort of demonstration of doing new things is really important. And that's important even if you were, say, put on the alternate list, right? That meant the admissions committee thought you were wonderful. They thought you were ready to start medical school this year, but next year is a different cycle and next year is a different applicant pool. And so that growth is really important. But to answer the specific question about sort of what do you want to change, for the UW School of Medicine this year, we do not see previous applications. So in the past, and a few years ago, we don't see previous applications anymore. So there's no one going to be looking through line for line saying, oh, this person changed this sentence and not the other sentence. Why did they not change from one, this experience, but they did change this other experience? Or why did they change this one paragraph of the personal statement but not this other paragraph? So I don't think you have to be worried about, at least that's true for us right now. That's not necessarily what every medical school would do. So we do always recommend going in, rewriting, rethinking, re-reflecting on all the things that you've done. And because your motivation for medicine may not have changed since the last time that you applied, right? When you're doing your personal statement, but hopefully something else has changed since over the course of the year. So usually I tell people to, at the very least, go through and try to rewrite it, because it's an exercise in sort of thinking about what has changed, but someone is not going to sort of go line through line, if that makes sense, and sort of question what you did and didn't change. All right. The next question is going to be directed to Sarah, and I'll have her read it.
The question is, does UW School of Medicine accept update letters? And what we try to do at our institution is have as equitable a process as possible. We want everyone to be considered using the same materials, the application and the interview. So we have just decided to not accept any additional information after that application is submitted. That means we do not accept activities updates or letters of intent or thank you notes. We just decided to say no to all of that so that everyone is considered using the same materials. That being said, if you have an activity update, something new and cool that you have been doing since you applied, or you have new reflections on your experiences that you want to share with the committee, you'll have the opportunity to do that at your interview. So you're welcome to update the committee at your interview on anything new that you've been doing, but we don't accept any written updates so that everyone can be considered using the same materials. And then it looks like other questions. Why don't we go to a question about clinical hours? Alex, how do you feel about answering that one?
I think I can pull that off. I tend to get this one in the inbox somewhat frequently. The question being, is 1,500 to 2,000 clinical hours enough? Especially if these hours are from scribing and completing an AmeriCorps internship at a free clinic, or do these hours need to come from different roles in healthcare? So the short answer, which you should also find reflected on our website, is that we don't actually have a clinical hour minimum as a program. And so what we really tend to emphasize is kind of what you have gotten out of your clinical hours. So our website is a great resource for this. The clinical hours page covers quite a few bullet points that can help you contextualize what you could be taking out of your clinical hours, how you are thinking about them, and how you are reflecting on them and the greater scope of healthcare and all of that. Which you should be applying to pretty much every clinical experience or hour that you have had so far. And so pulling that into the, 1 to 2,000 of clinical hours, the answer there is basically it can be enough if the reflection that you can generate out of this and then communicate to the admissions committee is sufficient to effectively communicate to the committee that you are a fitting applicant to be a physician. And so, but generally speaking, the way that it is easier for you to get these experiences and to make these reflections come more naturally to you is indeed through trying different clinical experiences. So scribing in this particular question example, the scribing, an AmeriCorps internship, and a free clinic, that sounds like two different examples of clinical opportunities. So it sounds like either a great start. If that was sufficient for you as an applicant personally to have a good reflection on what your motivations are to be in healthcare and to feel that you have lived that experience, then yes, we will say that is sufficient. If you feel like for whatever reason you could still benefit a little bit more from getting out of your comfort zone, from trying something new, if you think you really need to do something else to get that good reflection on what the previously mentioned motivations to be a physician, then keep going. And don't really think about it necessarily as just a number on its own. So I think I'm going to pass this next one to Alexander. And this one will be about residency, if I am understanding that right.
Yes. Yeah, so we do get a lot of questions about state residency. Just one quick thing to say at the beginning is that state residency is determined by each state, and those are legal criteria that are set down by each state. So it's different in Washington compared to Montana, compared to Alaska, and so on. So this one is specifically about, this question is about residency in Washington. For example, someone who's born and raised in Washington, lived there for pretty much their whole life, but then went away, for example, for grad school or went away to university, something like that. And then is thinking of putting another state, for example, California, as their state of residence. So first of all, we'd look at what you list as your legal state of residence as AMCAS to determine which of the cohorts you're considered for, and therefore what residency requirements you're going to be required to fulfill. So for Washington, there is a provision so that if you are out of state for the purposes of education, but you maintain your, basically you maintain your ties to Washington, not in terms of ties to a WWAMI state in that sense, but legal ties, that you can still count as a resident here. So some things that can affect that are if you keep your Washington state driving license, if you have some sort of residence in Washington where you're receiving mail, if you keep your voter registration in Washington rather than switching it to another state, those things can affect whether or not you're able to keep your legal residence here. And it is then possible, if you're out of state for the purposes of education, to keep your Washington state residence. It's going to vary a bit for each individual situation, of course, so there's no one blanket answer to all of it, but that's something definitely to look into. And then what you have to think about then is, depending on where you're applying, what makes the most sense for what you list as your legal state of residence. If you are really focused on getting into the University of Washington, you really want to be here, then putting Washington as your legal state of residence might make the most sense for you, assuming, of course, that you do manage to qualify for those. If you're looking at a lot of schools outside of Washington, maybe you're applying to medical schools in California. In that case, maybe it makes more sense for you to list California as your legal state of residence, again, assuming that you can qualify there. So that's what I would say is what you want to think about there. Just because you've been living in another state does not necessarily mean that you can no longer be legally a resident of Washington. Right? Hopefully that answers that pretty clearly. And I'm going to pass this on to Sarah next.
The next question we had is, does research really is there really an impact of research on the application and what that looks like? And the answer is that the UW School of Medicine does not and has not required research to apply to our medical school. And what I would say is that if it's something you're interested in and you're passionate about, by all means, get research experience. But if it's not something that you're particularly excited about, you don't have to include research on your UW School of Medicine application. That being said, you're going to need to review the requirements for every school you're applying to, because there are some medical schools that require research experience, but we are not one of them. You will get some research experience while you're in medical school. It is an important part of being a physician, understanding research and the contributions of research to medicine and to patient care, but you're not required to have it ahead of time. But again, if it's something you're excited about, something you're passionate, by all means, pursue that during your preparation period. Next up, we have a question about letters. Sonia, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the question is, what are you looking for in letters of recommendation? And I would say that our committee, when they're reviewing the files, and that's true during the sort of screening process and when they review the letters in preparation for the interview, that they're looking for a sort of broader picture of the applicant that maybe the applicant can't provide on their own. And those include, we have a list of the things that we have a website page about this and sort of the things that we're looking for, but it's a lot about the sort of interpersonal abilities of the applicant. So things like leadership ability, teamwork, you know, important work skills like being punctual and friendly and being helpful and considerate, right? All these things that are maybe harder for an applicant to demonstrate in their written application because you're talking about yourself in a way that, you know, somebody might talk about you in a different way. Just to add, this was not part of the original question, but we get this question a lot. Like, does it matter who writes the letter? If I'm working in a lab and there's the PI in the lab is, I work with them sometimes, but I actually have a much closer relationship with with the graduate student. And in that situation, I usually recommend that people ask the letter writer who knows you better, because that person's going to write you a better letter of recommendation than somebody who interacts with you a little bit. The same is true in a class. If the professor versus the graduate student who's working with you, you really want the letters to show that somebody knows you really well. And somebody just sort of writing a generic letter doesn't hurt you, but it certainly doesn't help you. All right. Looks like our next question came from the Q&A. I'm going to pass that to Leanna about the committee.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. The question is about our committee structure and whether it changes year to year, and kind of who sits on the committee, which I think is a great question. Helpful to know the context. So as you may or may not be aware, we have a very large admissions committee. We rely on the graciousness of many volunteers from across WWAMI who really are invested in helping us select our next generation of physicians throughout WWAMI. And so the makeup of the committee is really faculty, community physicians, basic scientists who are also faculty. We have community members who have a close relationship to the School of Medicine and or to WWAMI. We have other healthcare professionals such as physician's assistants, and we have students who sit on our admissions committee. So that's kind of the committee at large, and it does change annually. As you can imagine, students move on. We get new students on the committee. Folks have there are limited terms that they can serve on the admissions committee, and that is to just kind of keep it fresh and have new perspectives and make room for new people to join. We also have a subcommittee of the larger admissions committee who is made up of that we designate as our executive committee, and so short hand for that is our XCOM, and you might hear that or see that in a variety of spaces. And those are really our seasoned admissions committee members. They represent all of the foundation sites across our 5 states, 6 campuses, and they're folks who have really sort of been committed to the admissions process for a while, and they have the extra responsibility of kind of making the final decisions on all of the applications as they come through. Those are our voting members, and they represent a wide variety of the folks that I mentioned before, with the exception of students. Our students don't have the capacity to serve on our executive committee, partly because they're students first, and because of the short time that they're able to be with the admissions committee. They don't garner enough experience to serve as XCOM. But yeah, so those folks do also turn over. The terms are limited, and those folks turn over again to get a fresh perspective and to kind of keep things moving along. But yeah, so that kind of is the content and makeup of our committee. And we really try to encourage a vast representation across the region, across specialty, across interest, across other demographic factors and the such. So yeah, so that makes up our committee, and I really appreciate somebody asking that question, because I'm really proud of our admissions committee and all of the folks that serve, because they are volunteers, but they are very committed, and they take this volunteer service work very seriously. So I think our next question is going to go to Alexander to talk a little bit about Washington residents and where they can apply.
Yes, so for Washington residents, you're applying to either the Spokane or the Seattle cohort. And there was a question about whether an applicant's chances would be higher if they applied to the Spokane cohort compared to the Seattle cohort. The short answer to that is it really depends on who you are. It's not like playing the numbers kind of game. we're looking for different things a bit in different sites. So for example, in the Spokane site, one of the things that they're really looking for is people who are going to come back to serve the needs of Eastern and Central Washington. So are you someone who has ties there or some kind of demonstrated likelihood to end up being a physician in that area? If the answer to that is yes, then perhaps Spokane would be a good fit for you. If the answer to that is no, then maybe Seattle's a better fit for you. So it really depends on who you are and where you, not just where you see yourself going in the future, but where your background indicates that you might be going. And that's really what more to think about rather than what are the percentage chances, because that's completely up to who you are, where you're going, where you've come from, and all of that. So it's really more about thinking about the fit to the site and what they're looking for, what needs they're looking to fill, rather than, like I said, a percentage kind of thing. So I'm going to pass it on again to Alex to talk a bit about prerequisites.
Thanks. I think I'm actually going to combine two of our questions in the Q&A for this, so bear with me. Basically, the questions are, I'm a reapplicant and will be applying in hopes of matriculating 4 years out of college. How does UWSOM weigh the recency of applicants' pre-medical coursework? And is there any preference from UWSOM in terms of when and how students continue their education prior to medical school? And the second question is, if I received a low grade and a prerequisite and retook the class, how does the admissions committee evaluate that? And so the reason that these can be combined together in a more or less coherent sense is largely because the way that the admissions committee uses your academic grades for the most part in the application process is to ensure that you have your most recent coursework basically would demonstrate that you are not a sort of academic risk when you enter a graduate program with intensive coursework. So generally speaking, kind of like with the MCAT, it helps to have some recent coursework on your transcript within the last 3 years, because a lot of things can change in 3 years. Your study habits might change. Your preparedness to be in an academic environment might wane or change in some way as well. So generally speaking, your recent grades are used sort of as a general assessment of how they think you might do when you hit the MD program. And so because of that, it does help to have some more recent coursework within those last 3 years if you can do that. And it does help to have good grades in that and to have an upward trajectory in your grades during that time. There is no strong preference for which classes you have taken during that time, although STEM classes almost always help. And retaking your prerequisite classes is not inherently an issue, as long as you retook them and you had this good grade to demonstrate that you still understand that core material. So there's no issues with retaking classes, and having classes that are somewhat older might not necessarily be an issue if you back then you had good grades in them and you are showing us a good MCAT score, which is within those last 3 years, to show that you are understanding of the material and would likely do well in a testing setting. But if possible, we do encourage you to have some coursework within the last 3 years to show the admissions committee that you can do well in this classroom setting. So I'm going to pass the next question over to Sarah.
This question came in on the form. If we choose to do medical research during a gap year, would doing research that aligns with what specialty we want to pursue be a good idea to show that we're focused? Or should we show an overall interest in medicine since we don't know what specialty we'll end up pursuing? Well, one thing I do want to say right off the bat is that I actually don't love the term gap year because it suggests sort of a void or an emptiness. I like to think of it more as personal and professional development time, right? So during the time that you're not in school, you're certainly still learning and growing. It's not empty time. So that's the way I like to think of it. And during that time, we get a lot of questions about what should I do? What's the best thing to do? What's going to look best to the committee in all different experiences, whether it's research or otherwise? And I would just say you are going to get the most the most learning, the most growth from experiences that you are excited about, that you're passionate about. So do the things that you're excited about and that you're passionate about so that you can learn and grow from them and demonstrate that to us in an application. So for the specific question, doing research about the specialty you're interested in, should you do that or should you do something more general? And I would say if looking at one particular research focused on a particular specialty is what you're especially excited about, absolutely pursue that. If you're sort of curious about other types of specialties or about medicine in general, absolutely follow the other thing. The committee isn't going to be nitpicking which type of research you do. What they are going to be looking deeply at is what you say about them. What did you learn from the experience about yourself, about medicine, about patients, about all of those things? That's what people are looking for when they read your application, not the name of the thing, what you learned from it. So when you're trying to decide what to do, find the thing that's going to help you write the most interesting and deep reflection on it. And it is good to recognize that you may not end up in the same specialty that you're currently interested in as a pre-med when you graduate. That's certainly true. And that this is your time to explore. And while you're in medicine, you're also going to explore. Keeping an open mind is valuable. And sometimes doing something can open up that that passion and interest. So do feel free to explore during this time and think less about what is the committee going to want to see and more, what do I want to pursue? What am I interested in? And that's going to serve you well. Next up, I think Sonia was going to follow up on a question about letters of rec.
Yeah, so someone just had a clarifying question about letters of recommendation. And because I was talking about how, we want somebody to write the letter who knows you, somebody to write the letter who knows you really well, whether that be the professor or the graduate assistant. So this person asked, do you consider a letter written by a science GA or TA instead of a professor to fulfill your academic science letter of recommendation requirement? And we wanted to answer this live so that we can say and have it recorded for perpetuity. We don't have any requirements about who needs to write the letters of recommendation, recognizing that some schools certainly do. So that's really a question for a different school if they have a requirement about the academic science letter and who is sort of eligible to write that letter. My hunch would be that they don't have a preference of who writes it, as long as that person can talk about your academic ability in the science setting. But as I was sort of saying, our letters are really looking at the whole person. And so we get that people who've been out of school for a long time, people who went to a giant university, maybe they don't have that really strong relationship with a science professor, but they do have a really strong relationship with their manager at Starbucks for the past 3 years. And that person's going to sort of give us a better sense of who that person is and what they bring than somebody who doesn't know you that well. So the short answer to that one is we do not. Any sort of letter is fine. And I am passing the mic back to Leanna.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's important to have these questions. We get these a lot, so I love that we're finally, sort of putting them out there for people to know. Another question came in. So I talked earlier about the committee, and the next question was, how is one accepted after an interview, and who makes this decision? Which is also a great question. And I just want to emphasize that the UW School of Medicine has what we call rolling admissions. And so sometimes it can be, we recognize that this process is a lot of hurry up and wait. It's a lot of hurry up and make sure you get deadlines, and then you're waiting for us to actually process the application and process the information that comes from an interview. So generally how it happens is that I talked about our executive committee, which are the seasoned members of our larger admissions committee, and they bear the responsibility of making final decisions. They also are the folks who are going to be sort of the leading the interview process. They're also part of our screening committee. So they kind of follow out, see applications all throughout the process. And their ultimate responsibility is to make the decisions on every application that comes through. So after an interview, an applicant, if you're, and it does depend on which cohort you apply to across the WWAMI region. For Seattle, there are several weeks of interviews that happen throughout the season, and we typically try to make some decisions on applications following each sort of block of interviews. So candidates may we'll find out something typically after they've been interviewed, whether they've been accepted, not accepted, or if we're going to continue to evaluate their application with the next round of folks that we interview. So that's kind of that rolling admissions concept where we start interviewing late September, early October, and the Seattle cohort will interview all the way through December. And final decisions will be made in December or early January. For our regional partners, such as Spokane, there's a couple of different weeks that happen, so not as many, but still with that same concept of rolling admissions. So we select, at each of those, during those times, a portion of the class, and then there's a final meeting for them as well. That usually happens what will typically happen somewhere in January. And then after the first of the year, we complete all of the rest of our cohort interviews. Typically for all of the other sites within WWAMI, they'll do a week of interviews, and then decisions will come based on the whole cohort following those meetings. And again, those decisions are made by the executive committee, where each candidate is kind of evaluated within the cohort to determine the most competitive candidates that meet the sort of align the best with our mission and meet the workforce needs of that particular cohort or that particular state or region. All of that is taken into context during that evaluation process. So that's how it happens. So again, folks are kind of finding out their status throughout the season. If you're part of a WWAMI regional cohort, you won't know until after the interview week happens sometime in January or February. But if you're Seattle or Spokane based Washington resident or out of region, that's going to be a little bit of a longer process. But we do that in an effort to ensure that every applicant is reviewed appropriately and equitably across the entire cohort. So that's how that process happens. And so thanks for that question. And I'm going to have Alexander talk a little bit more about reapplicants and questions that a reapplicant has.
Sure. So this question came in the context of reapplication, but I think it's actually a great question for anyone to hear the answer to. And that is, how does the UW School of Medicine view previous experience in specialties other than primary care and family medicine? I'm concerned that I've been doing work outside of what the School of Medicine is widely recognized for. So yes, it is true that primary care and family medicine are things that we are recognized for, but it's not all we're looking for. I hear time and again that we need all specialties in all sites, basically. So doing things outside of those two is not going to hurt your chances in any way. We really are looking for people who are going to be doctors, not people who are going to be just one kind of doctor. So do the experiences, take those experiences that are meaningful to you, take those opportunities that are out there for you. If you're passionate about oncology, take oncology. Do whatever it is that makes the most sense for you. Don't worry about, does this match what the UW is known for? And I'm going to pass it off to Sarah now.
That leads nicely into a question we got about, on my application, should I specify the type of medicine or career that I'm interested in, why, or why I'm interested in medicine in general? And the answer is, whatever works for you. Everyone has a different journey to medicine. Along your journey, you're going to uncover different goals that you have. It is perfectly appropriate in your application to talk about those goals. Those goals can include things like specialties you're interested in, but they can also include things like what kind of population you want to work with, right? Do you want to work with a refugee population or a rural population or a geriatric population? Those are perfectly appropriate things to include if you have those types of goals. If you want to work, in different kinds of environments, right? There's a lot more to what kind of doctor do you want to be than what specialty. right? And that question should be considered broadly. What kind of person do you want to be in that room as a physician interacting with patients? What kind of doctor you want to be? Those can all be your goals, and you should include those in your application. They'll also come up certainly in your interview, but it can be really helpful for the committee to know if you have considered different types of medicine and what kind of doctor you want to be, to include those in your application. That can be a really important part of your reflection on your experiences as you are looking through, looking at the clinical experiences you had. Think about what you like about them, what you didn't like about them, and why, and dig deep and sort of keep asking those questions to learn more about, to know what kind of physician you'd want to be. Again, more information on that is found on our clinical experiences page on our website. And then I think we just have a couple questions left and we're going to wrap up. Alex, do you want to answer one?
If we have the time, I can address an MCAT question real quick. I'm not sure where we stand on that.
Go ahead.
Sure. So real quick is the question being, how important is the MCAT? If we feel like we didn't do well, but well enough to apply, should you prioritize a more competitive score or more clinical hours, research experience, etc.? Is taking the MCAT 3 times a red flag or something schools will look at as proof of determination? So in short, we will see all of 3 of your MCAT scores, and the real question there would be is whether or not you have improved over those 3 times. The only case in which it would ever be likely to be a red flag is if you have retaken it 3 times and every single time your score goes down, or there's no clear improvements or there's no clear changes in how you're handling the MCAT score overall. If you every final MCAT score that you have, I would generally suggest going on our website and checking out our MCAT page, because every year we release a very helpful diagram that has an intersection of MCAT and GPA scores, and it shows the amount of applicants and offers that we got for every person on that matrix. The amount of applications we got, and then how many offers folks in that quadrant received. So if you can go check that out and then see where you think you might land approximately on that and kind of do the math for the statistics and see if you're comfortable with that. If you don't like it, you can always try retaking your MCAT if you still have the possibility to do that. But if you don't have the means to retake your MCAT for whatever reason, or you want to run with this MCAT score and then try to improve your application in other ways, then the most helpful things to counter this MCAT score would be good grades as, an academic counter, and setting aside academics altogether. Then yes, you can use more your clinical hours, or rather your reflection on those clinical hours, your research experience, etc., to then talk about why either in spite of or alongside your particular academic score, you are still a qualified candidate to be a physician. So a lot of it is kind of how you frame it, how you reflect on it, and how you talk about it in your application. And then I will hand it back to Leanna.
Great. Thank you, Alex. And we are nearing the end of the time that we had allotted to answer your questions and for you to ask admissions anything. I do want to address one final question that came to us in the Q&A, and the question was about the use of AI in the admissions process and how does the committee use AI? And I will just say at this particular juncture, the time this is recorded, we are not currently employing any artificial intelligence into the process of evaluating and making decisions on our applicants. Stay tuned. Who knows what we'll be doing going forward. I do want to make one plug for you to understand that we recognize applicants are using artificial intelligence as they're preparing their application. I want you to be very mindful and think thoroughly about how you employ artificial intelligence when you are, gathering your information, putting your application together. Do know that the admissions committee is aware of this and that we are looking for these things. So ensure that you're, reviewing your application and ensure that it says things that reflect who you are genuinely. We also encourage you very strongly that your interview will not be enhanced by the use of artificial intelligence, and most likely will be able to be detected by any interview committee that you're up in front of. So think strongly about how to best use artificial intelligence in helping you throughout the process. We know that it happens, and we just want you to make good decisions around how to have it help you enhance your application, but not replace your application with artificially generated content. So with that, I just want to say a huge thank you for joining us today to learn more about the UW School of Medicine and our process, and really, like I said, to ask admissions anything. We hope that you enjoyed the time with us and you found this valuable. We always enjoy learning more about what our applicants are interested in finding out. It really helps us update and tailor our resources to meet your needs based on the types and flavors of questions that you are asking us. So thanks again for joining us. We do want you to continue to reach out to us. We always want to ensure that you're feeling really confident about your application once you're ready to apply. So please utilize our website again as our #1 resource. We know it's jam-packed and kind of takes some patience, but all of the information is there. If you're looking for updates and a little bit more insight into like student life and those sorts of things, be sure, like I said earlier, connect with us on our social media pages, and go to our YouTube page to find previous recordings. All of that stuff, all of the content is there for you, really to help you, put together the best description of yourself, who you are, what you mean to medicine, why it's important, why you matter to medicine, what is your story and what has your journey been. We've tried to provide those resources for you. You can also look for other sessions that we host throughout the season, and we might focus on other aspects of admissions or of the School of Medicine in particular. So again, thank you for taking time to ask us anything. Keep the questions coming. We hope that you take good care of yourself and wish you all the best on your journey into medicine.